Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and this is part 2 of our Father's Day tribute for 2021. And as you have probably seen from the thumbnail, and hopefully you've seen part 1, we are trying to replicate my father's first car. His first car was a 1966 Chevrolet Impala Station Wagon. And there she is in all her glory in 1976. As I mentioned in part 1, when this picture was taken, this car was deceased. Basically, while we were driving from Petawawa, Ontario to Pembroke, Ontario to get groceries. Actually, it was while we were coming home, if I remember correctly. The car overheated. It didn't have a temperature gauge. It just had one of those idiot lights, which is only as good as the light bulb. And it overheated on a hot summer day, and the block was either warped or cracked or something. It was dead. The irony was, somebody actually offered to buy the engine from my father a few weeks before this. So anyway, this is the last picture. We only have, or the second last picture, you only have 2 pictures of this car. This one and then another sad one just before it was towed out to an artillery range to be blown up as a target. So we're not going to be able to build that exact car. That car was a 66. And as far as I know, there is no model of an 1966 Impala, and if there was, not one that was readily available. So we're going with the 1967 because there's actually 2 67 kits available. We have AMT's Impala SS. It's a 2-door, and the one we used is a modification of that kit, and it's the 4-door sport sedan featured in the long-running TV show Supernatural. And I never saw the show. Nope, never did. So whereas I would prefer to be actually building this as a 66, because there are definite visual differences between the 66 and 67, we're using the 67. And actually that's a better looking car, I think. So if you've watched part 1, you know that we took that black sedan and we turned it into a station wagon. So here is the 2-door coupe, which was very similar in size and shape, just the rear roof line a little different, and of course the door lines were different. So here is our modified body. Now I still have to put a B pillar in because the wagons did have B pillars. That still has to be put on, but I think most of the body work turned out fairly successful. I still might want to tidy up these 2 lines a bit, but I recreated the back end pretty good. Still going to put a roof rack here. We better get cracking. I only have a few weeks left. You know that most of our plastic surgery on the body is complete, and I'm waiting for the stores to reopen so I can buy some paint of the appropriate color. I'm starting actual assembly on the rest of the car. I've got the floor pan and the fuel tank painted here. It's just neutral gray. That's just silver, although really the real car should have been just solid rust at the time at which it finally died. And it wasn't even 10 years old at that point, so maybe that gives lie to the old, they just don't build them like they used to, or maybe they build them better than they used to. Don't know. But at any rate, you can see we've got the underside painted, and if we take a quick look at the instructions, there's quite a bit more parts here on this AMT kit than a lot of their classic car kits where you've got like an axle and maybe 2 parts, and that's the whole underside completed. Working on the inside, one thing that's definitely going to have to be changed, we've got the rear seat here, is this rear package shelf, as it's sometimes called. Of course, on the wagon, that shouldn't exist. I know, in the 80s and 90s, there was lots of hatchbacks that had like a little curtain thing that pulled across to cover this area. That didn't exist back in 67. So I'm going to have to amputate this, and then I'm going to have to build a floor pretty much on this level all the way back and fill in this whole area. I'm pretty sure the one we had didn't have the fold-up third rear seat as many wagons back in those days had. Ours didn't have that. At least I never saw it up. If me or my friends were back there, we were rolling around like dice. That's what's going to happen here. I'm going to have to take this off and then construct a seat back, which not a big deal. Here we can see I've filled in the back of the rear seat. And actually, I just used the parcel shelf. I cut a rectangle out of that piece, and I just glued it in. I might need to fill these areas here. I'm not sure. I think the sides of the car actually block that, but we'll see as we go on. But, it was nice that I was able to use the textured piece on the back of this. So I've got to start on the engine here. And one of the big drawbacks to this kit is everything is molded in black. Chevy engines of this vintage were painted orange. Have you ever tried painting orange on top of black? Yeah. So I'm going to prime this with some flat white just to get us closer to something we can put some orange paint on. Oops, I guess I skipped over filming some stuff. You can see I've got the interior probably about halfway done here. I've got the side panels painted and basically installed. You can see a little bit of filler here. That's to fill in where the gear shifter would be. The car my dad had was an automatic, and actually the steering wheel has got a gear shift mounted on it. The next thing we've got to do that's major here is we have to fill in all this area, because of course now it's visible with it being a station wagon. And I wanted to put this together first just to make sure that I had the right width for everything. And as a matter of fact, the sides pinch in a little bit. So I'm going to be just putting some pieces of plastic in down here where my thumbs are, just to splay them out a bit. So otherwise we end up with large gaps between the outside of the car and the inside of the car. So I'm going to be building a floor back here with some styrene. You can see here that I've started developing the floor, and I'm pretty much limited by this piece of plastic right here. My thinking is that this is probably much higher than it should be. I'm not about to start hacking that out and trying to get the floor lower. I'm just going to end up putting it basically where you see here, because when you look in the sides, I just want there to be a wide open space here. Really, it should probably be, let's say, this height right here. But like I said, without doing a dramatic amount of surgery to this, I'm not going to be able to do that. But at any rate, you can see I've marked the length here just simply by tracing along the underpan. That's going to be way, way too long. It's still going to be narrow or shortened up a bit. Our floor is almost cut to length. I've just put a little bit of plastic cement in there just to hold it in place temporarily. I'm going to pop this into the body and see how the length does. I have probably 10 minutes to pull it back out and pop this thing out if I need to do any adjusting. And of course, any damage is going to be between this part and that part where we'll never see it. But I got to make sure it's about the right size. And as I said, I would rather this be maybe 3 or 4 millimeters lower, but I'll accept things as they are. It's June 11. We've been in lockdown since, around Easter here in Ontario. we're finally allowing non-essential retail to be open. So I'm here at my local Canadian Tire to get some metallic blue paint for our Impala. So the floor is glued in place, and see I've added these blocks on the outside. That's just to splay the sides of the car out a bit. We need to get the sides here glued in and some other fit things finalized pretty quickly, because I, of course, do have the appropriate paint purchased. I'll show you that in a second. Let's just clip that on. There, you can see we're still not a super tight fit, but it's in the realm of that could be the windows going up. So if we look in, you can see I still need to put the sides of the luggage compartment in. So I think it's probably a function of our times, but I'm pretty sure that the automotive paint section used to be way, way bigger than it is now. Because, I mean, it used to be there was probably a couple thousand colors. Now you're lucky to have maybe 200 colors. There was only 2 light metallic blues. The other one was definitely darker. I mean, well, it says it's a GM color, but it's obviously not going to be that exact one from the 60s. So this fits what I remember in my mind. It seems to be pretty close to the car we're duplicating, even though the year's not going to be exactly the same. So we're close to actually painting the body now. Alright, we're getting close to paint here. Touched up a couple other bits that look to be a little rougher than I would have liked. One thing I did finally add, you can see we have actual B-pillars here. And as well, if I grab our reference material here, you can see the framing around the upper parts of the window is actually quite substantial, and it's silver. So I've added that here. You can see that's been added in there, and that tends to make the back window look a little bit less squashed. I noticed it didn't look quite as large as it did in the pictures, but it's based on the roof line and the haunches, so I mean that's how big it has to be. So anyway, I'm never going to get it perfect. Certainly looks like Impalas I've seen, although like I've said before, ours was a 66, this is a 67. So I think we're about ready for the paint here. One other thing before we send it to paint, you can see I've added these panels right here to the cargo compartment, and they're basically filling in the worst of the gap between what AMT gives us and what we have back here. This goes almost to the floor. I think there's a small gap. I'm starting to run out of time, so this is not going to be a perfect fit. We'll see how it looks in the end. And it's painted, and I'm pretty happy with it, except for one thing. Can you see that one thing? It's jumping right out at the top. It's funny, it didn't really show when we had it in primer, but it certainly seems to jump out now. I think it's because of the metallic. It picks up different, it picks up in the light. So I have this fine sanding block here, and I actually used the more aggressive one when I sanded the whole thing down. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently go at it this way, and it shouldn't be difficult to repaint this area. I won't be happy unless I try to fix it. Alrighty, that probably wasn't the greatest thing to do. Less than a week before I want to have this thing finished. But there was a couple areas where what appeared to be quite smooth with the white primer, you could see scratches. So I sanded any area I wasn't happy with. This paint seems to cover really well, so I'm not too terribly worried about it. But you can see how I basically concentrated on that rectangle that was sitting proud. It'll probably still show, but at least I I can still feel it a little bit, but it's way better than it was. The funny thing is it was sitting proud, but it was actually lower than these areas. So you can see here's another little area. A bit on the tailgate I wasn't happy with. So let's give it another shot of blue and hopefully we can salvage things. As usual, I'm rushing to do 101 things to finish a model. As you can see, we've got all the blue paint on, and we have some chrome on here. Now, I was thinking of doing this chrome strip here on the side with bare metal foil. However, I guess I didn't make my sacrifices to the bare metal foil gods, and wasn't having a whole lot of luck. And at one point, I was ready to pitch this thing at the wall. So I grabbed my trusty Model Master chrome silver trim, and I basically, in one sitting, brush painted it all with no masking whatsoever, and it turned out surprisingly well. It's kind of funny how that'll happen sometimes. So I still need to paint the radiator and a lot of these hoses and things. If we flip it over, you can see that I've got the interior painted one of the 2 or 3 interior light to medium blues. And you can also see the bits of wall that I've added back here. Oh, and one other little thing. The hood requires a little bit of work to get to fit. When we put it on here, you can see that it's still sitting just a little bit proud on the sides. And if you look here, you can see that I've kind of had to grind a little bit off the top of this support. Be forewarned. I've got some of the painting in the engine bay done. I'm currently in the last phases of trying to fit the body onto the chassis. I say trying because it's about 90% of the way there. Just doesn't quite want to sit down that last 5 or 10%. But before I go any further, I need to put in our back windows, and I suppose I could get away with having this one open, seeing as the glass did retract. But I'm going to be putting that in as well. So I have some side windows cut from acetate. Alright, it is Thursday morning. And, of course, the furnace, or the air conditioner just kicked in because I'm recording. Anyway, instead of going to sleep, like I should when I get home from work, I'm working on this. I would like to be able to say this is 98% complete before putting up part 1, which is hopefully going to happen tomorrow. I do have part 2 mostly edited. So this is an important thing, is whether or not this is going to fit together. It's close to fitting on. What I'm finding is it's the last 2 or 3% that it's having trouble with. So, of course, this is always the most stressful part of putting a car model together, is, you know, when you're trying to flex the body to clear all the bits and pieces, because you know you're going to break something off. It's just gonna happen. I'm fully expecting my acetate windows to blow out or something. Okay, I'm going to turn off the camera because this is going to get messy here in a second. Okay, this is the best it's fit so far, so that's good. Now, the only thing I'm not real happy with is this strip right here. You can see this black strip. Not happy with that. I suppose I can either, even if I was to paint the back edge of the dashboard blue, it still wouldn't look quite right. Natasha's idea was to paint the inside of the windshield, just that bottom little bit there, silver. And oftentimes there is a metal part that's kind of grabbing onto the inside of the windshield. So I have to look at that. That's one of the last decisions I wanted to make here. Oh, I'll figure something out. Alright, the chassis and underpan is well attached to the body now. And as you can see, I've got the wheels on. If we take a look at the windshield, you can see I ran a little bit of silver just at the bottom of the windscreen. And a lot of cars have that little bit of metal there. It's certainly better than the black stripe there was. I'm just about to put some hoses in the engine compartment here, and of course the frying pan on top, aka the air cleaner. And we're getting close. The only thing I have big time left is the rear bumper and the turn signals, and I also have to put that funky little handle thing here. Which, if it was the basic car, it flipped open and it was literally a crank for getting the glass to go down. Otherwise, you flipped it open and there was a little key, and you turned it one way and the glass would go up, turned it the other way and the glass would go down. Our modified taillights have been glued onto our modified bumper. Now, I know that this upper area here should basically be thicker where it goes over the license plate, and I know there also should be little cutouts for reverse lights because the wagon has, I don't know why, it has three red lights on each side. You know, maybe the idea is when the tailgate flips down, it would block those reverse lights, and that would cause your problem while you're backing up. I don't know. I know this certainly wouldn't pass current modern safety standards because these lights would be obscured when the tailgate is down. It's all done. Our 1967 Impala Station Wagon. And as I've already mentioned several times, my dad did not have a 67, his was a 66. But close enough. The basic lines of the car were very similar. The front was not quite as ornate on the 66, and the taillights actually wrapped around the rear quarter panels. And if you're wincing at the fact that the roof rack actually leans forward into the wind, the pictures that I was going off of the car that was for sale, I believe in Arizona, that's where the pictures of the red car came from. The roof rack does in fact lean into the wind. And if you're thinking it looks spindly, most stock from the factory roof racks are pretty spindly. I think they've got maybe a weight rating of about 100 pounds or something like that if you're lucky. So, more to give you the impression of usefulness than truly be useful. So, this is my first major bodywork to a car model in terms of like completely changing something. And there are things I'd like to have done differently. Would have liked to have taken like maybe 6 months to do it. I probably would have redone it several times, but when you're working to a deadline, sometimes you got to say, well, it's good enough. The wheels are the ones that come in the Supernatural kit. They're really way more fancy than I would like. I would like to have had just a dog dish style, or not really a dog dish, you know, the sort of hubcap where it covers almost the entire wheel and doesn't have a bunch of spokes and things. That's probably what most Impalas had. But I ended up compromising and giving them a heavy wash of panel wash, and that knocked them down fairly effectively. Now let's have some glamour shots. Now, what's with the gold car? If you've watched my first Father's Day tribute, or if you caught it during the first part of this particular series, you heard me mention that this car, which died in 1976 when it was 10 years old, was replaced by this car. Or actually, a 66 was replaced by a 74 Pinto. This is a 77. This model was actually built by my dad probably around 1980, 81, something like that. I don't know, maybe 79. Anyway, this is his handiwork here. I'm not sure where the roof rack is. It's over yonder on my workbench somewhere, one of my workbenches. But for those that, hadn't realized just how big a full-size 60s car was compared to something like a Pinto, which actually, even though it was small for the time, was fairly large for a compact car. You can see the difference in size here. My dad used to say he went from parking the Impala in the garage to deciding which corner of the garage he was going to put the Pinto in. So he didn't hate the Pinto. In fact, both of these cars were major rust buckets. The Pinto, actually, we did a huge amount of body work on it, and it lasted for maybe another 2 years before he sold it for a grand total of $45. And that car survived at least for another 15 years. I encountered it years later. And because of some of the stuff that we had done bodywork wise, I recognized it. So, although I'm sure somebody put many more hundreds of hours into it. So, there we go. Now I have 2 cars that represent my father's first 2 cars. And I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for watching. And until next time, just keep on modeling.